Hello, everyone. My name is Nathaniel Freeman, and this is Freeman's Money. And today we're going to be talking about inflation, what it is, and how to make it work for you. But before we dive into that, we have to talk about money and what that is, and what money really does, and why it has the value that it does. So, let's go back in history. Back in the day, where we didn't have money or currency, we would exchange goods for goods. So let's say you want some candles and you had a loaf of bread because you're a farmer and some guy's a candle maker. You would go and exchange a loaf of bread for the candle, and there you go. You would get your candle. They would have a loaf of bread. But unfortunately, life isn't that simple. So let's say the candle maker already has some bread and he wants grapes. And then you go to the grape guy and you're like, hey, can I have some grapes? And he's like, okay, I want this. So then you would go to that guy and be like, can I give you this loaf of bread for this so I can go get grapes so then I can go get the candle? And let's say he said yes. But instead of having to do all of that, some guy created a system. A system where instead of running all over the place trying to make trades so you could get the one thing you wanted, you would only have to make two. You would go and sell for a object, and that object was determined to have value based off of the fact that you could exchange it for other goods. And let's say that's a coin. That's the foundation of money. So you would take your bread and go give it to this guy, or sell it, as it would be, and he would give you a coin in change. And then you could go and buy a candle with that coin. So you only have to make two trades, from selling to buying. It's all based off of this coin, which is determined to have the value of either a loaf of bread or 50 loaves of bread. But it's determined that you can go and exchange your object for this piece of item, coin, let's say, and then go and buy something else. But money only has value because you can buy something else with it. And that's what determines it to have value, what you can buy with it. So, let's talk about inflation. Let's say we've determined that there's 1,000 coins in circulations. Hey, buddy. So we've determined that there's 1,000 coins in circulation between people exchanging goods for something and then people going and buying things. So let's say you can make 1,000 loaves of bread. That would mean that each dollar is roughly worth one loaf of bread. Just to make it simple, we'll say that. So you have 1,000 loaves of bread, you have 1,000 coins. So roughly one coin is worth $1. Now that's not exactly how the system works, but we're going to use this because it's going to make sense in a little bit. So let's say that you make 2,000 loaves of bread now. Now, each dollar, since there's still only 1,000 in circulation, is going to be worth 2 loaves of bread. You with me? So the more of a product you have, the cheaper it can be. And that's just basing off of that. Now, the same thing works in reverse. Let's say you have 1,000 loaves of bread and you have 2,000 coins in circulation now. That would mean it would take 2 coins to buy 1 loaf of bread. Now, that is inflation. So when the government prints more money and adds that into the system, that's adding more money to a vast amount of currency, which is then devaluing all the money that's already in it. Okay? So let's say there's $1 trillion in circulation, 1 trillion. If we release another $1 trillion worth of money, that would mean there's 2 trillion in the market. That would mean inflation went up by 100%. So when people talk about inflation going up 2%, that means out of the entire volume of money, they're adding 2% more money to the economy. Now, what does that mean? That means things get, your buying power with your dollar gets less than. So maybe that loaf of bread that was being sold for $1 is still being sold for $1. So now it's well, not technically, but it's cheaper. So let's talk about what the government does with this. Let's say they have a massive loan of about $1 billion, and they're paying a 1% interest rate on that. So they're gonna pay, what's that, 10 million a year in interest. Now they're also printing money to make the inflation rate at 2%. So that means that there's more money coming into the system than the debt is charging them in interest. So they don't mind keeping debt on the table, because each year that debt's buying power keeps getting less. And since the total amount of money that's going into the economy is flowing through it, since that's increasing, their overall pay, or the amount of money they can bring in with taxes, is going up, and that $1 billion seems less. So let's say the government has $1 billion and they take out another $1 billion in debt. That's very expensive. They're like, oh my goodness, we got $1 billion cash, we got $1 billion. We could be at a net zero. Now let's say they print another $1 billion to help themselves out. Well, their debt just got half as valuable, because now there's $2 billion that the government has, and their debt is $1 million. So now they're like, okay, we can pay that off and still have $1 billion left over. Now, how to make this inflation work for you? Now, one of the things to pay attention is to your pay. If your pay is not increasing every year, that means that your services are becoming less valuable every year, because as inflation rate goes up, if your pay is not matching that inflation rate, then you're losing your buying power for what you're getting paid. So let's say at the beginning you could afford a huge mansion. Well, in 10 years you might only be able to afford a medium condo, just because if you're not keeping up with inflation, you're slowing down. The other thing to keep in mind is when you go into good debt versus bad debt. So if you've got a debt that's paying 12% interest to whoever you're borrowing it from, they're making a lot of money off of you, because you're paying the 2% plus another 10. Now let's talk about mortgages. When you're at an interest rate of like 1.8%, and then with this COVID and all the money we've been printing out, we can see that money's going to be, inflation's going to be a little out of control for the next little bit. Not out of control, the government's going to mandate it, but we could see like 3, 4, 5, 6% inflation rates. And if you've got a mortgage at like 1.8 or 2% right now, since they're at all-time lows, your debt's going to be getting cheaper every year, which means that you could really extend your debt that you have right now. Let's say you put in 30-year amortization, and at like 1.89 for the next 5 years, you could really stretch your debt out to where by the time you're paying off the whole thing, it's a lot lower buying power wise, which means you could do a lot more with your money. By the way, I'm a mortgage agent with Dominion Lending. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out about mortgages. I'm here to answer them. But that's that's inflation. That's how it works, how it came about. We did a little bit about money. I know this is kind of a grandiose topic, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always here. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys here next week.